The sun had barely begun to dip below the horizon, casting the forest in an eerie, amber light when the first explosion rattled the air. Echoes of metal tearing apart followed, vibrating the ground beneath Sam Harker's boots. He'd been out on a routine scout mission in the wilderness, checking the perimeter of the human colony when the crash echoed from the hills. His instincts kicked in, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle slung over his shoulder, the grip of it solid and familiar. The sky above shifted from orange to dark blue, the stars beginning to blink to life in the distance. Yet, amidst the peaceful night, there was a disturbance. Something massive and foreign had just dropped from the heavens. It had to be a ship, but the nature of the explosion suggested something went terribly wrong. Sam wasn't exactly in the mood to investigate, but his curiosity overpowered his initial hesitation. Not to mention, there was no way the higher-ups would let him leave without checking out a potential alien contact site. By the time he reached the crash site, he was deep within the dense woods, his boots crunching over twigs, his breath steady, but his senses alert. The strange hum of something alien vibrated in the air. It wasn't like the usual spacecraft. This sounded like it was struggling, its engines sputtering before finally falling silent. Sam emerged into a clearing, and there, half buried in the mud, was a wrecked vessel. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Sleek but twisted, its surface a shimmering mixture of dark metallic hues and iridescent reflections. His military training warned him against approaching too closely. There were protocols in place for such encounters. But there was something about this wreck that gnawed at him, tugging him forward, urging him to make sure there were no survivors or threats. His pulse quickened when he saw movement near the ship's hatch. Something or someone was crawling out from the wreckage. A figure, slim, hunched, and covered in mud, staggered onto the ground. Sam's hand tightened around his rifle, but the figure slowly straightened and turned its face toward him. It was a woman, or at least something that resembled a woman. Her skin was a deep shade of green, her features sharp and angular, with eyes that reflected the twilight like pools of liquid silver. Her hair, a cascade of tangled tendrils, looked almost like fibers woven from the night sky itself. She seemed disoriented, half covered in the thick mud that had spilled from the wrecked ship. Despite her strange appearance, Sam could see her trembling. For a moment, neither of them moved. Sam's instincts told him to wait, to observe. She wasn't human. The data on extraterrestrial life was scant at best, and here she was, a living, breathing alien, somehow alive despite the apparent wreckage. He had to be careful. Could she be hostile? A part of him wanted to just open fire and end it before things got worse. But the woman's odd, muffled cries stopped him cold. She was speaking, but in a language he couldn't understand. Strange, guttural sounds punctuated by frantic gestures. Sam's confusion shifted to caution as she turned toward him, mud dripping from her face, her silver eyes wide with panic. She staggered forward, taking a step closer, her voice rising in pitch. "Come on, human, drench me already," she demanded, her voice harsh and broken. She repeated the phrase over and over, her desperation evident. Sam blinked, his mind struggling to comprehend the words. Drench? What was she asking for? The alien girl's hands were extended toward him, trembling as she beckoned him closer. He hesitated, still unsure of her intentions. Should he approach her? Was this some kind of trap? His military training screamed at him to stay at a distance, to treat everything as a potential threat. But her eyes, those wide, desperate eyes, pulled at something inside him. She wasn't threatening him. She was terrified. "Drench me!" she shouted again, her tone now sharp with frustration. "Drench! Water!" She made an exaggerated motion of wiping her face, then pulling at her clothes as if trying to rid herself of the mud that clung to her. Sam's confusion deepened. Did she mean to wash off the filth, or was there some ritual to her demands? Water. That was all she wanted? His mind raced, trying to process the situation. Should he offer her his canteen? Should he try to communicate with her? He had no training in alien languages, no clear way of understanding her. But one thing was becoming obvious. She was in distress, and something told him that if he didn't help her, things could get worse. Carefully, he unclipped his water canteen and stepped forward, his rifle still at the ready but lowered. The alien girl immediately lunged forward, grabbing at the bottle with a surprising strength. Sam's hand instinctively tightened around the canteen, but he didn't pull it away. He needed to be sure. Her eyes locked onto his for a split second, something almost pleading in them, before she twisted the cap off and began to pour the water over her head. She let out a relieved sigh as the cool liquid streamed down her face and neck, washing the mud away. The dirt that had caked onto her skin vanished, revealing her true form more clearly. Her body, though slight and thin, was powerful, the muscles beneath her skin evident in the way she moved. There was something almost otherworldly about her. Elegant, dangerous, and completely foreign. She wiped her face with her hands, looking up at him with what almost seemed like gratitude. Her expression softened for a brief moment before she spoke again, her tone now calmer, though still strange. Drench. Water. Thank you. Sam was still uncertain. The language barrier was formidable, but he could see the relief in her eyes, the way she no longer seemed on the verge of collapse. But he couldn't afford to let his guard down entirely. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had she crash-landed here? A low groan echoed from the wreckage behind her, and she froze, her eyes darting back toward the ship. Sam's pulse quickened. Had something else survived the crash? Was there danger yet to come? Before he could ask, the alien girl spun back toward him, her expression shifting from relief to something more intense. "We go," she said firmly. "Now. Danger." Sam didn't need any more encouragement. Whatever was behind them, it wasn't good. He gestured for her to follow as he moved cautiously back toward the trees, his rifle at the ready. She stumbled behind him, still slightly unsteady but alert, as though she knew something he didn't. He couldn't afford to trust her completely, not yet. But for now, they had a common enemy, and that was enough. The forest around them grew darker, the sounds of the wild creatures growing louder, almost menacing. Sam's thoughts raced, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whoever or whatever had sent her here had a purpose. He was about to find out just how deep this encounter would go. The alien girl might have needed water, but Sam knew the real question was whether they both would survive the night. Sam moved swiftly through the trees, the alien girl stumbling slightly behind him. The evening had deepened, and the forest had grown unnervingly quiet, as though it were holding its breath. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them, or that they were being watched. His instincts, honed through years of training, told him to keep moving, but his mind was focused on the strange girl who had somehow appeared out of nowhere. Her name, if she had one, was still a mystery. She hadn't said much since their initial encounter, and every word she uttered seemed more cryptic than the last. "Danger," she had said. What danger? Who was she, and why had she crashed on Earth? His eyes darted nervously to the horizon, scanning for any signs of movement. The alien girl seemed unbothered, almost too calm given the circumstances. Despite the danger she had warned about, she appeared more at ease now that she was free from the wreckage. The water had helped, he could see that. Her skin gleamed a deeper shade of green, the mud now washed away, revealing an elegant, almost ethereal beauty. Her eyes, silver like liquid mercury, flickered with a strange intensity, like she was scanning the environment as she walked. For all her otherworldly appearance, there was something undeniably human about her, something that tugged at his curiosity and sense of empathy. She was lost, and though she might not have been from Earth, in that moment, she seemed more like a refugee than an invader. Sam couldn't help but wonder what had brought her here, what she was running from, and how she had ended up in the wreckage of that ship. He could feel the weight of the silence between them as they navigated the forest. Sam knew he needed information. He needed to understand what was happening, what had happened, but how could he get her to talk? She'd only said a few words since the crash. Her voice had a sharpness to it, an edge that made it clear she wasn't someone used to being vulnerable. Yet there was a tremor in her hands that didn't escape his notice, a flicker of fear behind her silver eyes. Sam glanced over his shoulder. "We need to find shelter. If there are other survivors." She cut him off, her voice soft but urgent. "No survivors." Her words held a finality that sent a chill down his spine. "Only me. We go." She didn't explain further, and Sam, though itching to ask more, realized that pushing too hard might not get him anywhere. Still, there was something deeply unsettling about her tone, as if there was more to her story, more to this crash, that she wasn't ready to share. The night grew darker as they pushed forward. Sam finally slowed, pausing to scan their surroundings. The forest had always been his domain, and it was here that he felt safest. But now, with the unknown presence of this alien girl at his side, and the looming threat she kept hinting at, the familiar trees and shadows no longer brought him comfort. The girl stopped abruptly behind him, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. Sam's heart skipped a beat. His hand instinctively went to his rifle. She was staring at a movement in the darkness, something beyond the reach of his flashlight's beam. "What is it?" Sam whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. The alien girl didn't respond. Instead, she dropped into a crouch, moving silently toward the edge of the forest. Sam followed, his pulse quickening as he silently cursed himself for not preparing for something like this. Had the wreck not been enough of a warning? Whatever had brought this girl here, whatever had caused that crash, was clearly still hunting them. The girl moved like a shadow, her body fluid and unnatural in its grace. Sam, by contrast, felt clumsy and out of place. His mind raced, trying to piece together what little he knew. She had mentioned danger. Was it some kind of pursuit? Some kind of military force? Was she a prisoner? They reached the tree line, where the ground sloped downward into a clearing. The moonlight revealed a patch of open ground ahead, and Sam's eyes narrowed as he spotted figures moving just outside the shadows. There were at least 3 humanoid but not quite human. They were tall, broad-shouldered, their faces masked by some kind of dark, reflective material. Sam's breath caught in his throat. They were soldiers, alien soldiers. The girl tensed beside him, her body language shifting from calm to a quiet, simmering readiness. She didn't make a sound. Her silver eyes narrowed as she watched the soldiers. For a long moment, no one moved. Sam held his breath, wondering if they had been spotted. But the soldiers seemed to be scanning the area, their heads swiveling as if looking for something or someone. A small flicker of movement near the edge of the clearing caught Sam's attention. A larger figure stepped into view, towering over the others. This one was different. It was covered in dark armor that gleamed like obsidian, its helmet sleek and featureless. The figure's presence seemed to command the others, and as it moved, the soldiers straightened, acknowledging its authority. Sam's pulse raced. Who was this, and why were they here? The alien girl next to him shifted again, this time with purpose. She pulled herself to her feet and began to move toward the clearing, her eyes locked on the soldiers, a deep intensity radiating from her. "Wait!" Sam hissed, grabbing her arm. She jerked it away from his grip, a flash of irritation crossing her face. "What are you doing?" "They hunt me," she said, her voice low and controlled. "They will not stop until I am dead." Sam's grip tightened around his rifle. "You're telling me they've been chasing you? For how long?" She turned her gaze back to the soldiers, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Long enough, but they won't find me if I move fast. You stay behind me. Do not move unless I tell you." Sam didn't question her, though everything in his gut screamed at him to get out of the open. He had no idea who these soldiers were, but he knew they weren't friendly. And he had no idea why the girl had been so intent on coming here, or why she was apparently running from them. As they moved toward the edge of the clearing, the girl's pace quickened. Sam followed close behind, trying to stay as silent as possible, his heart hammering in his chest. Every instinct told him to retreat, to run back to the colony, to put distance between them and these dangerous enemies. But the girl's resolve was something he couldn't ignore. She was leading him into the unknown, but he wasn't sure what choice he had. The soldier figures stood frozen for a moment, as if sensing something, their heads snapping toward the trees. The girl tensed, her fingers twitching at her side. She glanced back at Sam. "Run," she commanded, her voice urgent. "Now." Before he could process her words, she was already darting forward, her movements fluid and fast, slipping into the shadows with an uncanny grace. Sam hesitated for a split second before instinct took over, and he followed. The chase was on, and there was no turning back now. The forest blurred around them as Sam and the alien girl ran, the sounds of pursuit growing closer with each breath they took. The heavy crunch of boots on the forest floor told him they weren't alone anymore. Whatever had been tracking them was now closing in. Sam's heart raced, and his mind screamed at him to stop, to think. But the girl's determined pace kept him moving forward, deeper into the unknown. Her movements were swift and silent, like a predator moving through the trees. Sam, by contrast, stumbled over roots and uneven ground, trying to keep up. He could feel the weight of his rifle pulling at him, slowing him down, but there was no time to shed it now. His training had taught him how to move quickly, but this wasn't just an ordinary escape. They were being hunted. "You know them," Sam panted, keeping his voice low, barely audible over the sounds of their flight. He didn't dare look back, but he could feel the heat of pursuit behind him. "The soldiers. Why are they after you?" The alien girl didn't answer immediately. She kept her focus ahead, her eyes scanning the darkness like she was reading it, seeing things Sam couldn't. He felt a sudden pang of frustration. He had no answers, just questions. And yet, despite the danger, despite the overwhelming odds, he found himself trusting her. She was different, yes. Alien, strange. But there was a quiet resolve in her that reminded him of a soldier, of someone who would fight to the end to protect herself. "They want to stop me," she finally said, her voice barely more than a whisper in the wind. "I am the last of my kind." Sam's mind froze for a moment. The last of her kind? What did that mean? Was she some kind of fugitive, a survivor of a war or a massacre? He wanted to ask more, but he knew that now wasn't the time. Ahead, the trees began to thin, and the ground sloped downward. Sam's breath came in sharp gasps as they entered a small valley. He could hear the soldiers now. He could feel them getting closer, the crunch of their steps louder as they closed in. They couldn't afford to stop now. If they did, they'd be surrounded. The alien girl veered off to the right, slipping through the underbrush with barely a sound. Sam followed without hesitation, his instincts kicking in. They moved in silence, but Sam could feel the tension building with every passing second. There was nowhere left to run. If they didn't find shelter or a way to defend themselves, they'd be caught. Without warning, the girl stopped and crouched low. Sam did the same, instinctively mimicking her. They were in a small hollow now, the valley widening out in front of them. There was no cover, nothing to hide behind. The soldiers were almost on top of them. Sam's pulse quickened. "What now?" he whispered. The girl's gaze flickered toward him, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She didn't speak, but there was a moment where she seemed to gather herself. Then, she nodded once, almost to herself, and straightened up, moving forward with a purpose. Sam's mind raced. There was no time to strategize. The soldiers were already in the valley, their figures moving through the trees like shadows. They were closing in, and soon they'd have them cornered. Sam had no idea what the girl planned, but there was something in her demeanor now that suggested she wasn't afraid. "I'll distract them," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "Distract them? What do you?" The girl had given him a chance. She had created a diversion, luring them away from their position, but how long would it last? He could hear her voice now, faint but clear, calling out to them in an alien tongue. The soldiers' heads snapped in her direction, their attention fully on her. This was his moment. Sam rose from his crouch and moved quickly but silently toward the soldiers. He couldn't fight them all, not without better firepower or backup, but he could take one down. That might buy them just enough time to escape. He kept to the shadows, moving with practiced ease. When he reached the nearest soldier, he crouched behind a large rock, watching the soldier's movements. The figure was tall, armored, and slightly hunched, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. Sam took a deep breath, steadied his rifle, and aimed for the soldier's head. A quick, controlled squeeze of the trigger. The shot rang out sharp and deadly. The soldier crumpled without a sound, falling forward, its dark armor making a dull thud as it hit the ground. Sam's heart pounded in his ears. He didn't wait to see the effect of his shot. He darted into the cover of the trees, moving with haste. The soldiers were distracted, but they wouldn't be for long. Sam could hear their leader shouting orders in a language he didn't understand, but the urgency in the tone was enough to tell him they'd be mobilizing fast. He had to find the girl. He pushed through the underbrush, moving as quickly as he dared. His mind focused entirely on getting to her. He could see her now, standing at the far end of the valley, facing off against the soldiers, her hands raised in a gesture that looked almost peaceful, but Sam could see the tension in her posture. She was preparing to fight. He couldn't let her face them alone. As he approached, the sound of the soldier's footsteps behind him grew louder, but he didn't dare look back. The girl was at the center of the clearing now, and she was ready for whatever came next. Sam's pulse quickened as he reached her side, his rifle raised, ready to defend her, ready to fight for survival. But she was already moving, faster than he could track. In an instant, she closed the distance between them and the soldiers, her body flowing like water as she reached one of them. With a speed that left Sam breathless, she disarmed him, twisting his arm behind his back and incapacitating him with a single motion. The rest of the soldiers hesitated, clearly caught off guard by her agility and strength. Sam's rifle snapped into position, his aim steady. But before he could fire, the alien girl held up a hand, signaling for him to stop. "They will not harm us," she said, her voice cold but resolute. "Not if we show them that we are not their enemies." Sam's mind reeled with confusion. Was she really suggesting surrender? After everything? But as he looked at her, at the calm confidence in her eyes, he realized something. This wasn't about surrender. This was about survival. He lowered his rifle. For now, anyway, the standoff hung in the air for a long, tense moment. The soldiers were watching them closely, the air thick with unspoken threats. But the girl didn't move, didn't flinch. She stood her ground. And then, as if on cue, the soldiers backed off. One by one, they turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the valley in silence once more. Sam stood in disbelief. It was over for now. But how long would it last? The girl didn't speak at first, her eyes scanning the dark valley, watching for any sign of danger. Then, without looking at him, she spoke again. "We move now. You're safe. For now." Safe? Sam wasn't sure he felt safe at all. But as the night settled around them, he realized that this was far from over. Whatever forces were after her, and now after him, would not stop. But for the first time, he felt the weight of their shared bond, of their fragile alliance, and he knew one thing for sure. They weren't alone in this fight. Not anymore.